7.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody to this expert panel discussion. My name is Simon Gebauer. I'm the chair of the European Chapter of AMEC and the CCO of Observer Brand Intelligence in Vienna. I'm happy to have you all here to this panel discussion about data quality. This is a collaboration between the EU chapter, the LATAM chapter, and the Tech Hub Special Interest Group of AMEC. Special thanks also to my co-chair, Sofia Karakeva, who had the original idea to put this topic to stage after it started as an online discussion, basically. So thanks, Sophia, for helping put this great panel together and organizing it. And yeah, without much further ado, I'd like to hand over to Raina Lazarova, who is the co-founder and CCO of RuPoint, and also the chair of AMEC. So Reni, as we call her, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Simon, and welcome everyone again to this panel discussion, which is officially part of AMEC Measurement Month. As probably most of you know, it is a time of the year that we all look forward to, and I would like to invite you to visit the AMEC website and take a look at the host of events which our members are organizing throughout the month of November. As Simon said, I'm Raina Lazarova, and I'm the co-founder of RuPoint and global chair of AMEC. And I have the absolute pleasure today to introduce you to our great lineup of speakers. Aldo Vietri, Research and Measurement Manager of Edemo DXI and AMEC Board Director. Rob Key, CEO of Conversian, AMEC Board Director and Chair of the Technology Hub at AMEC. Frank Gregory, Social Intelligence Lead at the Center of Marketing Excellence at Nestle, and Carl Mason, Head of External Monitoring, Corporate Relations at Shell, also part of the AMEC Board of Directors. And before we deep dive into the topic, which has so many different dimensions, and I think is as exciting to everyone as the topic of AI probably, I would like to ask everyone if you could briefly introduce yourselves, your role, and why data quality is important to your organization, and particularly in the context of communications and measurement. Maybe if we start with you, Aldo.
Yeah, sure, Reni. Well, my name is Aldo Vietri, and I am the manager of research and measurement at Edelman Argentina, and very recently also in Peru. At Edelman, as you know, our business is to build trust. So our point of view about data accuracy is integral to building trust. We work emphasizing that if there is some error in data, it can call into question even the most insightful analysis. So this focus that we are talking today on data quality is foundational, as reliable data strengthens both internal and client relationships, and ultimately enhances or has to enhance strategic decision making. So in our view, at Edelman, data accuracy isn't just a value, isn't just an add-on, it's a critical component that enables us to produce trustworthy insights that clients can confidently base their strategies on. And also we can say that from the agency side, our clients are always pressing for quick insights to take decisions. But we have the advantage to have a dedicated data department with a separate P&L, for example. So this independence allows us to prioritize data accuracy and rigor, enable us to pursue the quality of metrics without also compromising our speed on delivery the insight. So we view quality checking as more than just data validation. We see this as part of our business.
Thanks, Aldo. And I'm sure we'll come back to two of the key points you brought up in your intro, speed of delivery and creating trust. Can we then move on to maybe Frank, and then Kyle, and then Rob?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Frank Gregory. I lead social intelligence for Nestle USA. So specifically the US market, and everything related to not just social listening, but also social audience analysis, influencer vetting, content analysis, et cetera. So everything related to social research. And I support roughly 30 or so brands, and probably 10 different product categories when you think about Nestle's portfolio, just in the US alone. And so for me, I am a one-man show, at least from a FTE perspective. And so when you think about a small team or one individual person that has that many brands, I have roughly 450 stakeholders, something like that. Brand managers, innovation leads, social strategy and community managers, research analysts, et cetera. And so I need to, when it comes to speed of insight, I need to democratize these tools and get everyone in the tools looking at my dashboards and looking at my AI summaries and all that great stuff. And so it has to be accurate. If it's not accurate, I don't have the ability to data, quality control 300 different reports that are going out on a weekly basis on my own, right? So I need the AI to be tight. I need the segmentation to be tight, and so that's one of the biggest challenges that I have right now. Is that sure, when there are large, important, executive level analyses that are asked of me, then that's where I can dive in and really do some robust analysis. But the self-service, automated, dashboards, they need to be able to answer 75% of the questions that I get, so that I don't get 300 questions back to me every week, right? And so it needs to be very accurate, not just from a sentiment perspective and things like that, but also from like a AI summary perspective, et cetera. So we'll get into that more as we dive in.
Thanks, Frank.
And I'm Kyle Mason, and I run global news and social media analytics in Shell's corporate relations function, where I've been for over 6 years now. And prior to Shell, I spent 10 years in news and social media analytics for Prime Research, which is now part of Cision. And alongside news and social media analytics, within Shell, we got more established sectors like polling, like focus groups, and many areas where there's more structured data. And so when it comes to social media or news data where it's largely unstructured, data quality has always been a challenge. But with greater data integration, greater capability led by AI technology, arguably data quality is even more important now than it has been before. And I think having worked in this industry for over 15 years, the importance of having decisions based on evidence is growing in PR and comms in general. And that data has integrity is critical to building trust that the PR and comms profession is making decisions based on data and evidence, as many other parts of the business already do. So I see this as a growing trend, and really excited to be discussing this with such an esteemed panel.
Excellent. Rob?
Yes, well, we've a long history on trying to find truth and accuracy in unstructured data. We built our first machine learning model in 2008. And since then, we've really driven innovation, I think, in the market. And to me, what it really boils down to is the ability for humans, a society, and businesses to find truth and accuracy in this massive data sets is really one of the biggest challenges we're going to face as going forward over the next few years. And we already see it: misinformation, disinformation. How do you get accuracy? And it's challenging. Human language is really complicated. So we're going to talk a little bit today, I think, how we can actually kind of make this work and hopefully get this data right.
Thanks, Rob. I mean, I think maybe it's a good place where we can start the discussion. Rob, you initiated this discussion some time back by emphasizing the importance of data quality in communications. Could you just start by sharing why this topic is so crucial, especially as AI becomes more integrated in communications, in measurement, and our day-to-day professional work?
Right. No, I'm happy to. And I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly, so I may talk relatively fast as well, but I'll take a few breaths in between, and then we're going to have time to be able to kind of go through this in more detail. As I was just saying kind of a moment ago, that this is a massive challenge, and I also think in the world of media and social analysis, one that is been kind of swept under the rug, because it's the plankton level. It's the genesis for everything else that we do. Is the data has to be correct, and as I mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time. But the state of the union right now is that we do have major data problems. And when I did this, when I spoke to a group of about 200 people not long ago, I asked how many people were happy with their data quality, and one hand went up. And I can't see all of you out there, but I don't know how many hands are going up. But it's almost a therapy session when we start talking about this issue, because people are looking at the data, but how good is it? Is it trusted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And according to multiple studies, so the SI Lab does a study that data quality is really the #1 problem, today. And unstructured data is messy. So, chief data officers are only happy with 8% of their data. And one of the big issues is this cost of data correction. 40% of analysts' time is often spent correcting bad data. And with limited budgets already, having people do that is obviously inefficient and costly, et cetera. And the big issue is about trust in many ways. A lot of the senior level executives, when they're looking at social data or media data and they see the metadata, do they even trust the data? And I think that's one of the challenges that's inhibiting the growth and the adoption of this data more broadly into organizations, because it's incredibly powerful. In the old days, basically, if there was 65% accuracy, which is kind of the standard for many foundational sentiment models across the industry, it's self-reported and studies have said the same thing. There was sometimes a ROI discussion of, well, would 90% be, what's the difference between that and 65%? Well, the other issue around data quality is in the old days, you might be able to get away with it a little bit if it was directional. But today, this unstructured data, social media is going into training LLMs. And so when you talk about doing summation, as Frank mentioned and others, it's only as good as the data that's actually being inputted into those models. So small little errors get extrapolated into very big errors. And we've heard about hallucinations and other things as well. This is a major, major issue. They garbage in, truckloads of garbage out. In our survey world, I just want to make a comparison for where we stand on this data quality issue. The survey world has recognized that about 25 to 40% of surveys are fraud, right? There are bots, there are all kinds of other things. 7 different organizations have come together to be able to tackle this head on, because they realize that it undermines the power and the credibility of this data overall. Well, if we look at our side of the world, it's at about 65% accuracy. We're still looking at 35% inaccuracies, which is right in the heart of that. And that doesn't even include things like data relevancy, et cetera, et cetera. So it's even worse than that. So one of the challenges that we really need to do is commit as organizations to data quality. And we're going to see more in this area. It was really interesting to me that P&G announced last week they're going to abide or require vendors to do ISO 20252, which is all about transparency and data quality. But what does this mean? So there's 4 levels of this really quickly. Is the data itself human and authentic? Is the data actually coming from humans? In many categories that there's spam and other things as well, and fraud. So sometimes 20 to 30% of conversations are actually authentic. Once we do that, are we translating it through effective metadata, so that the sentiment scores, emotion scores, or others are actually reflecting what the underlying data is saying? The third piece of that is, does this data actually connect to the real world? So for example, can this data predict outcomes? There's a great Forrester survey that shows that I think 70% of market intelligence or consumer insights goes on the shelf and doesn't get used because it's not tethered to business outcome. So we need to kind of bring behavioral data together with this social data to see that it actually has real world meaning. Because if not, companies are drowning in data. And perhaps most importantly, you may have the best data quality in the world, but if the people who matter within your organization do not believe it, then we have a problem. So establishing trust in the data is equally as important as the actual data quality itself. But this is challenging, right? So I'm just going to go through a few things. So first of all, the world isn't black and white when it comes to human language. There's tons of ambiguity. New language, neologism, they talk about it, new language kind of emerging all the time. So the critical thing when you're building models is to have clear definitions and understanding edge cases. So it's not just using really sophisticated state-of-the-art models, which we're doing, but it's how you train the models. And humans only agree between 60 and 80% untrained coders, 60 to 80%, even for things as basic as sentiment. Imagine going to emotion or trust or other things that's challenging. So you can just look at yourself. This is the kind of data that these algorithms are trying to process. And so ambiguity is challenges. Another challenge we have with data quality is where you're sometimes trying to impose classifications on data that doesn't exist or doesn't exist effectively. Plutchik's wheel of emotion, a lot of you may be familiar with. We were one of the first, I think, to use it in 2008. It was a consistent framework that was out there, disgust, anger, 6 different emotions, but it doesn't really manifest effectively in text. So therefore, you end up with a lot of disgust and anger, and sometimes a little joy, and it's not very accurate and it's not very actionable. So getting frameworks, we actually advocate for something called consumer tones, which is 14 different that does manifest. We can't impose things that don't work. The other problem is something we call entity level versus document. The vast majority of social intelligence and media intelligence is document level analysis. That means you are half blind in many cases because there are multiple opinions within a document. And if you're only reporting on document, you'll get positive, negative, neutral, but there's nuance within those documents that need to be gleaned out. That's something we call recall. And so you really need to get to entity level analysis, and even beyond that, facet level, which is even a deeper level. So all of you should become familiar with this concept of F1, because how do we measure these things? Is it having somebody on your team just kind of scroll through and see this looks great, this doesn't? We need to bring a data-driven approach to how we measure the AI models and how effective they are. So there's something called F1. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's precision and recall. Precision is it's nothing but the truth. It is the stuff that is how well those classifications match this gold standard of human, which is multiple humans looking at the same record and agreeing on it. Recall is the whole truth. So capturing all those different signals and opinions within a data set. So it curves because it's easy. I could have a precision score of 100 if I only cherry pick the stuff that's most accurate. I like this, I hate this. But as soon as you start to bring in more recall, then it starts to curve. You're losing some precision. So you want to find the actual balance between precision and recall. You want to get the most signals at the highest level of precision. Below a 0.80, 80 is about a human level. We don't believe and advocate that any models are used below a 0.80 F1 score, which represents average human performance. But models today can exceed individual human performance with new technologies. And this is critical. When I talk about having good accuracy, that's not enough. You need to be able to have observability of what your models are actually doing. We have a system that actually looks at how the data is classifying data against your own data sets and doing this kind of vital signs of your model. So you can actually see how it's performing at any point in time. This passes the sniff test of your data science teams, of your data governance teams, because over time, this is going to become a requirement to know exactly how well your model is performing on your own data so that you can also show this score when people are asking, how do I trust this data? How confident can I be in the insights and the data associated with it? This is called trusted AI. And trusted AI isn't just a kind of a name thrown around. It actually, there's a process associated with it. I won't go through this now, but this is basically, you're looking at your models, you are fine-tuning them, you're validating them, you are actually do things like data drift detection. So if language is changing, that the model will actually say, hey, I need retrained a little bit because I'm seeing stuff I haven't seen before. You're getting observability, and you can continue to fine-tune it again. This is human-in-the-loop governance, and it is not just a point in time. It is how the accuracy is over a continuous point in time, continuous tracking of your models. The other thing I should say, maybe we'll get to this, I'm not going to, because we'll probably talk about it a little bit in our panel, is that the beautiful thing about this is that we're at a sea change from a technology perspective. The old regression models, AI has been around since obviously the mid 1950s, and NLP right along with it. We're having a breakthrough with the LLMs, and not just the big ChatGPT LLMs. I'm talking about custom LLM specific for data classification, or we call them, we're doing small language models, because LLMs are overkill and don't really do exactly what we need. but they're able to understand context, slang, and other things as well. The old bag of words approaches were often very Boolean based, proximity to negative words to your brand, therefore it kind of predicts what it might be. We're beyond all of that. I spend my entire lunch hour trying to exchange my ticket at American Airlines. There's no negative word in there, but the LLMs understand this. So it's a whole different ballgame. And the beautiful thing is once you start to have this really good, accurate data, we have found that this data is actually predictive. So we can say, for example, for particular brands that this data, media and social data, is tethered to the real world because it can predict sales or predict other with about 85% confidence. And this actually is one of the reasons why hopefully folks like Frank and others will have much bigger teams, because this data goes right to C-suite. And so my question is to everybody is, do we believe that we have an obligation to get this right? In this environment today, do we need to reflect the accuracy, opinions, wants, dreams, hopes of the populace? Yeah, you probably will have to anyhow, because with the AI EU Act and other regulations that are emerging, they're talking about high-risk systems currently, but that's quickly changing and morphing into these other types. I would argue making bad business decisions on bad data is high risk already, but we will soon have to follow this similar type of AI trusted standards, I believe, in our own industry as what we see elsewhere. And that's it. I'll take a breath.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I think you deserve that. Look, I think based on your summary, we can definitely see there's so many questions, and we're only now starting to unpack the topic. There are many implications. You spoke about trust, about speed, about the fact that accuracy is not a point in time. If we maybe just start to unpack this from the perspective of what challenges we all face in our day-to-day and the implications of those challenges. And I'll pick one specific area that I'm sure all of us have come across and grappled with over the years, and that is sentiment analysis and the accuracy of sentiment analysis. I think the industry standard at the moment in terms of accuracy rate in automated sentiment analysis is as low as 65%, depending on the technology you're using. How does this accuracy level, which is clearly concerning, impact the credibility of what insights we provide and how we inform PR decisions? And I guess to kind of expand on that topic, what are the main factors behind that challenge and how do we tackle it?
Sure.
You want to start maybe, Rob?
Oh yeah, okay, sure. I'm happy to. By the way, it's even worse than the 35% with the 65%, because that's for data classification for sentiment. But upstream, as you guys, anybody who's been building Boolean queries to try to get relevant data in your data set for even names like Shell, which means multiple things, or you're going to find that you have a polluted data set. So in many cases, you're going to have 30% or 30% or 40% irrelevancy upstream before you even get to the annotation for the at that 65%, right? So multiply that out, and it's problematic. No, look, I think that the challenge around all of this is what value does that bring into the organization? And I think it has to be tangible. And so it's mitigating risks, aligning with the AI EU Act, its ability to do predictive analytics, but it's also a lower cost of operations. And I think this is something we have to talk about. We have a big tech company who they said that they have like 8 people correcting data every month. And if they could go from 65% accuracy to about 90% accuracy, which is where a lot of these LLMs are standing right now, whenever tuned to specific domains and specific brands, they're saving tens of thousands of dollars per month. So, I think we have to kind of just couch this in terms of business ROI. I think we have a moral obligation or social obligation to get this data right anyhow. But beyond that, this is good for business. But
yeah,
you require.
I would just build on that in terms of so as of I'm almost 2 years in at Nestle USA. Before I got there, it was kind of there was different tools. Kind of social listening was kind of out of sight and out of mind. It wasn't really being used a lot, at least in the US market. And so I kind of had a blank page, right? So I was able to bring in the new tools, new processes, et cetera. And so kind of reintroduced the idea of social intelligence into Nestle USA, which is great. And I've got a lot of kind of power users within the rank and file of Nestle USA, social strategists and researchers, et cetera. But inevitably, now the conversation is getting up to the C-suite, which is where we want it to go, right? And so they are asking for, hey, so we've got 30 brands. Can you give us a executive scorecard, which tells us, which brands are driving the most conversation, the best positive sentiment, et cetera. And I have to kind of always couch that and say, well, out of the box with the tools that we have, until we can really take the time to train these tools to be a little bit stronger with their sentiment analysis, you have to take the sentiment shifts with a grain of salt, right? You can't necessarily just like high five each other about a 3% increase in positive sentiment, or freak out about a 3% in decrease or increase in negative sentiment. And so you kind of have to like step back and peel back the conversation a little bit, which is underwhelming to an executive team when they just ask what they feel is a very simple question of, hey, can we get a scorecard across our brands, right? At the same time, then as I'm reintroducing social intelligence into Nestle, I'm getting really great projects that are coming my way around, can we feed this social data into our internal models to help predict whether or not certain ingredients or flavors might be trending in social, to be able to say maybe this is a new product on shelves that we should consider, right? And so I'm able to do that and feed them that data, but also, at least from the sentiment perspective, I still need to say, well, guys, again, when there's a massive spike, that's when you pay attention to it. Don't pay attention to the little, the little small blips in sentiment. And so we'll get into more of the solutions, and Rob spoke to those already. But from a challenge perspective, that's one of the main ones for someone who is trying to reintroduce the importance of social data into a large organization. Everyone gets excited, but then you also have to kind of couch everything with, well, it's not exactly a perfect world yet. Maybe we get there in the future. So.
And how do you deal with, I guess, the doubt that data quality and data accuracy creates around what probably is not an entirely wrong data set? Thinking about this from the perspective of a liar's dividend almost, some of the data will be correct, some of it won't. How do you deal with that challenge internally, both from a brand perspective, maybe for you, Kyle and Frank, and Aldo from an agency perspective, when your clients are saying, well, how do I know if the remaining 20 or 30% is accurate?
That's an interesting one, because when we talk about the, I'm going to use that 65% figure as illustrative, but the challenge with those sort of accuracy figures is it doesn't mean, okay, I've ran a topic and I've got 100 bits of data and 65% of it is right and 35% is wrong. Depending on the topic, all of it could be wrong. And on another topic where the model works far better, all of it could be right, or much of it could be right. So actually thinking back to what Frank was just mentioning, there's also an acceptance that we need as an industry that we can't expect a generic sentiment model to work. Because it's not going to work across all brands. It's not going to work across all sectors. And, as anybody will know that uses, one of the LLMs uses ChatGPT, your answers are only as good as the kind of prompt that you're putting in. And that's effectively what we're trying to do with some of the big sentiment models, is say, tell me whether it's positive or negative, but we've not given any inputs as to what we're trying to get out and what we're trying to glean. I think we need an acceptance that all those generic models will not work, and that's from a brand side, from a supplier side, from a vendor side. If you are giving those solutions, to accept that's not going to work, and tackle the actual issue, which is, well, maybe we need a new training set for each brand that we're looking at, or for each element, and work it together.
Yeah. If I can just add on that, I mean, those are all great comments. And to work backwards, I think Kyle saying that not one size fits all. And I think that that's, and first of all, the platforms, I give them great credit because they're trying to build something for everybody, right? And and when you build something for everybody, it's not perfect for everyone. And so the ability to fine tune these models on specific domains and also brands, because sometimes brands have slightly different frameworks or taxonomies of what sentiment means to them. We can do that much easier than the old days. The old days, if we had to build an entirely new model, you're starting with new training data. Today, we can start with a foundational model or an LLM model, and we can fine tune it and get it to really high precision. And I think it's also critical then, before that model is deployed, that you actually test it against your own data, statistically, see what the performance is, and send it. Because the way that in having dealt with these issues for years, the way of trying to build trust, I think, in this data is, if you start to try to people cherry pick and they see something wrong in the data set that corrupts the entire data set, you have to take a data-driven approach to these models and showing that, with statistical confidence, that this is what the performance is against an objective data set, a gold standard data set. And that way you start to change the conversation a little bit as well. And one thing Frank was saying about the dangers, this data is really, really noisy, right? So if you're just trying to report on spikes and declines and sentiment, you're going to go all over the place. You're chasing your tail. We actually do something. We have an algorithm that uses Bayesian statistics, right? So basically, if you can see historically what the variations of all the noise are, you can predict what the normal variation might be. And if it's going outside of that predicted variation, it means there is something actually happening that's meaningful, as opposed to just noise in the data. So, you have to layer on a couple of things to be able to get it to executive level reporting, in our perspective.
Yeah. To add my 2 cents here, I think, I don't know, 10 years ago, the rising of social listening platforms have in some way made it affordable to understand a social media conversation that could be huge. But at the same time, they have created the illusion that insights can be found quickly without an analyst, or without the need to invest time in having a model to classify posts or news, as if data could be easily transformed into information. So if we allow ourselves to be pressured by the person, by the client, by the new business manager, for example, that is doing a pitch and wants to bring some social listening, what will be happen is that it will be a mix of meaningful human conversation with, as you show, Rob, false conversation or content. So, and the thing is that with the rise of AI, there is a new wave of this optimism, So, the potential of artificial intelligence is vast, but there are responses from data that we absolutely must review before clients or prospects can see them. So the way to uphold true insights with that accuracy is sometimes to make it clear to internal or external clients that certain things cannot be achieved in such a short time frame, and in a way we can expect long phases, from that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's where, from my experience, my perspective, with Nestle, the immediate reaction when I started to show the value of social intelligence and what we could build was that, oh, okay, this is a silver bullet. Amazing. We're gonna, get these tools and then we're good to go, right? And I had to again kind of tell the story of, okay, so first we're gonna get the tools, right? We're gonna build and implement, right? Then we're going to start training people on the tools to be able to go in and check their what's driving conversation, etc. Focus a lot on the qualitative at first, right? Until we can then invest in either a larger team to be able to kind of go in and really refine the data and do really in-depth analysis, or additional kind of custom models that we can build on top of this data to get to quantitative accuracy, right? So I had to tell that story internally, because the reaction immediately was, oh my gosh, this is a magic bullet, and we can just, write a check for the tools, and then immediately we have this amazing new capability, and it's all perfect and accurate. And that's just not reality.
Right.
And it's also start delivering value, right, Frank, and demonstrating that value across the organization. That seems to be the only way to be able to defend more budgets for more people, bigger team. I mean, what you guys do, you specifically with a team of essentially one or a few people, is pretty impressive. Before we just go on, I would like to, we're just past the half hour. I would like to clarify, for some of you might think that this is a half an hour event. It is actually planned to run for an hour. So do not worry, we will continue talking for the rest of the hour. We're just starting to scratch the surface. I hope you can stay with us. I just wanted to have a look now at the brand perspective a little bit and the data challenges in terms of the need to monitor and track various channels. So for you, Kyle and Frank, and maybe everyone else can chip in, collecting the right data sources from different channels, social, earned, paid, the variety of channels that you cover, is clearly creating additional challenges to the task at hand. If there is data accuracy problems with one channel, then adding more channels adds clearly complexity to the data model and the algorithms that we need to deploy in order to be able to get as accurate insights as possible. What are the main obstacles from your perspective that you as brands face in this process? And I also wanted to come back to something Aldo mentioned. Clearly speed and automation go hand in hand. On the flip side, how do you balance human intervention and oversight to make sure that you add not only value, but make sure that the data accuracy improves over time?
Yeah, I can speak to the data sources and the different social channels, et cetera. I mean, I think first and foremost, anyone that works in social listening right now will know the challenges of some of the most important and well used social channels like TikTok are very limited in what they can provide, right? And so you do have situations where you might have a report that is showing the conversation themes, but you also have to kind of make sure that the person who is receiving that report is trained to at least have a good understanding and maybe a little cheat sheet around like what data is available for each of the different channels, right? So that they don't make a misinterpretation to say, oh wow, I'm not seeing any conversation on Facebook. It's like, well, Facebook doesn't really get pulled into these tools as much as X or Reddit or some of the others, right? Or TikTok. And so that's one challenge. I think to what Rob was saying earlier about the ability to go sentence by sentence when it comes to sentiment, as opposed to just at a document level. I think that's one of the challenges that I think I'm pushing the tools to be able to get to in the future. Is that when you think about Reddit, which is actually a really rich resource of information because it's more long form discussion as opposed to a tweet or a short form social post. Reddit can be very valuable when you are thinking about at least in my world food and beverage recipes or baking and different types of cooking, etc. And so Reddit can be great if we can get to the point where we are able to really break down the themes and the sentiment by sentence, as opposed to just looking at an entire, maybe 2 or 3 paragraph Reddit post and looking at it and just saying, well, neutral, because there's some positive comments in here, there are some negative comments in here, so the tool just kind of defaults to neutral. There are some tools out there from the ratings and reviews listening perspective that we're using that actually are already able to get there. They're able to get to sentence by sentence sentiment analysis, and so I think that really what we need to do as an industry is really push these social listening tools to apply that same capability and not just kind of default to document level sentiment scoring.
Yeah, if just briefly, I should maybe do a positive call out because I think there's a big change happening in the industry that it used to be to buy a platform, this is what you get, take it or leave it, right? There are platforms, I'm going to call out Brandwatch, I'm going to call out Meltwater and Pulsar, where they are actually they're starting to begin allowing integration of third-party models into their systems that can be pulled from. And this is really important because more and more brands are going to be building and deploying their own models as well, right? Because they kind of need to. So creating more of an open access system is going to allow for greater choice in terms of how companies want to and organizations want to have their data classified. Some, document may be enough. At entity or sentence level is another. Facet level is even more granular than that. Like which aspect of that entity do you like or not like? And we talk sentiment a lot, but I don't want to ignore like things like trusts and consumer attitudes and others, and the ability to start stacking models. So what we'll often do is you start with an LLM model that will actually classify human language from media and other things as well. So you're starting with human language, then adding a sentiment, then adding an intensity model. All these are pre-built models that are libraries that people can pull from today and use them. And you can get to much deeper classification and understanding of what's going on than just the standard off the shelf. But I hope everybody will continue to encourage the platforms they work with to open up this ecosystem.
Thank you, Rob. Karia?
I was going to say that that's a great point, Rob, because the key to getting accurate data in each space, you wouldn't go to one vendor and expect them to be able to do all of your social listening solutions and also go out and do your polling with the public or focus groups. People have their specialisms in this space, and I think we need to draw upon those specialisms. And sometimes these aren't competitors. These things are complementary. One of the challenges with integrating data is making sure that it's accurate across each of those ecosystems, but it can also be a plus, right? So your polling data may be able to draw something and validate something you found by social listening. So each of these elements all have their own aspects, which help to validate each other rather than contradict. So the more collaboration and this sort of open source model that we can do, I think the better it is for PR and comms as a whole.
That's great.
Yeah, the thing here is that the thing here is that particularly platforms and social networks are constantly making changes to their APIs. So and especially these past 2 years. So this is another layer of complexity, and it questions ourselves: how much do we risk in terms of compliance, for example, when using scrapping techniques? So I don't know, for example, LinkedIn conducted a trial for make its content available on its API, but then suspended it. So, and we haven't received any further updates about that. And recently, Facebook or Meta restricted access to information about comments, for example, what is the human flavor of Facebook, for example. And on the other hand, TikTok is running a beta of its API. So the thing is that the integration is a huge challenge, and I think it continue to be worse, for example. So I think a few years ago, an AMEC survey highlighted this division very clearly. Tech providers were willing or were available to provide information from sources that were easier to index, while clients or agencies often demanded access to the more challenging ones because the stakeholders stuck there. So I think obtaining data before talking about processing that data would be also a thing of data accuracy.
Thanks, Aldo. And I guess we spoke an awful lot about the challenges and the problems. I would like to move on and talk a little bit about the solutions and what future steps we all see in terms of tackling those challenges. Before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that you can send your questions in the webinar chat to the panelists, and we will try and pick up as many as we can after this last section. So speaking about solutions and future steps, custom AI models tailored to specific brand needs are clearly a possible solution to some of the challenges we've discussed today. Talk a little bit about the advantages of this approach and how feasible do you think it is for most organizations, both budget-wise, speed-wise, clearly, implications around how quickly you can get insights, to develop and implement these models. And talk a little bit about how this will change over time as well. If we see this being challenged from a cost perspective now, do we see that becoming more affordable in the future?
Maybe I'll just do a quick start. I think that, in terms of solutions, number one is commitment, right? I mean, the organizations need to commit to this from a senior level. And, I would love to see within our industry a coming together of organizations to create some standards and education around, making sure that, good enough isn't enough, that, highest level of accuracy is there, because the technology is now available to get this right, by the way. I mean, demonstrably, both the new state-of-the-art models, the classifications, the trusted AI, the model validations, the reporting, the data observability, it exists. Does it cost a little more? Now it costs a little more because these new models run on GPUs, which, are a little more expensive, as everyone knows who's ever bought NVIDIA stock. But the return on investment is massive, right? Because you're not correcting all this data. You're getting into predictive analytics, you're getting into brand tracking, you're getting into all these different areas that actually drive value to the organization. And you're not spending the time trying to correct data, and you get greater adoption within the organization. So, commitment comes first.
Any other views from the point of view of maybe the brands who need to invest and spend money? Do you see that being one possible solution?
Yeah, I think that we definitely need to be applying custom models to be able to get to the point where we have more trust in the data, more accuracy, and therefore we can get that those sentiment scoring reports and different dashboards up to the executive level with a level of accuracy and confidence. I think that the challenge is going to be around I've got 30 brands. Some of them have thousands of comments a day. Great. Plenty of data to work with to be able to customize and train. I have other brands that have a small amount of comments, maybe 10, 15 comments a day. And so for them, it's harder to be able, just from a data perspective, there's not as many people talking about that brand, right? So that brand, well, sorry, brand manager, for the small brand, you're going to have to just deal with the data at the level that it's at in terms of accuracy of sentiment, versus the large brands who are going to have the custom models. That's one challenge, that no matter where you are in the world, what organization you work for, if you are a brand that is less talked about, you can't do as much with the training of the data. I think the other piece, though, is that from a cost perspective, what I would love to see the tools be able to provide is as opposed to just having a generic sentiment scoring model that is supposed to be available to everyone, and the other side of that coin being the custom model. Not everyone's going to be able to afford to build their own custom models, right? And so for that middle ground, at least being able to apply an industry-specific model that at least gets them started, right? Okay, if I'm a small or medium-sized business and I don't have a massive budget, but I work within food and bev, can I select food and bev before I even get started with that tool? Right? Or if I'm in banking, can I select financial, right? Something like that to at least get us started. And then from there, as you build the story internally about the value of this data, then you can increase, hopefully get, more budget to be able to actually customize that, create a custom model.
Kyle, I mean, you manage multi-stakeholder demands and expectations. I think you have the benefit of maybe working with a slightly bigger team. But from your perspective, what are the possible solutions that you see to those challenges we just described? And you know, how have you started dealing with them at Shell?
Yeah, I think actually Frank's point about a sort of middle ground is probably the best solution for this, because even in our sector, I'm not necessarily always looking at our sector. We're a significant brand. We could be looking at trends in a certain space that's maybe tangential to our sector. Politics, the economy are also really important indicators for many different brands. So even sector-specific lenses may not necessarily grapple with everything that we work with. However, it is a start, right? And I think we need to have that beginning to be able to develop. And when we talk about accuracy, and I really do, I like Rob's idea of standards, because I would like to see some acceptance of that, because if you speak to many different vendors in many areas, you will often get I've never heard anybody give me as low as 65%, by the way, for accuracy. It's always far higher. But if we if we start with that honest conversation about what it is and what we're trying to do, then we can tackle it. And I think, Renee, I've spoken before about some of the things we're trying to get into is the more predictive element. And the challenge with getting to that is if your data that you put in is not accurate, when you then start to put predictive models over the top of that, it exacerbates the issue. It gets even wider. So it's impossible to do any form of prediction if you have bad quality data going in.
Yeah, I mean, I echo that. And you know, there is the nice thing today with the LLMs and the SLMs, or small language models, is what we use, because they're cost effective and very good at what they do. Is that there is a middle ground. You know, that there's the standard model. What it used to be in the old days, we'd have to build an entire custom model. What you can do is you can take, you know, a good LLM model that's domain specific, for example, and then you can have additional labels and you can fine tune it to that specific brand, and the brands can participate in this experience. They can do some of the labeling, and it'll go through a system and it'll help fine tune that model. Because in AI, we talk about how well models generalize. How well do models perform on data that they have not seen before, right? And it used to be, as soon as you jumped to domains, they completely went off the rails. You know, now a lot of the good ones just go a little bit off the rails. So you can fine tune them much easier with much less effort than you were in the old days. So there is a cost-effective middle ground that's available today.
I'm sure this is very encouraging to hear for large parts of our audience, Rob. I think there's probably still this perception that in order to get anything high quality from a, you know, kind of more custom-based approach, AI related, you need to invest a huge budget in it. I think it's important that, you know, we as a community and as an industry start to demystify this a little bit and talk about how you can get something, even if you want for less, or start small, as kind of Frank said, start with getting the right tools, the right data set, and build value from there. Hopefully you'll be able to then get more people on board on your team as you demonstrate value of your work.
Right. There's that old saying, you know, you're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants now when it comes to kind of the NLP, because there's been a tremendous amount of work done over the last decade to get us to where we are. And so, you know, the costs have come way down in the ability to do this.
Exactly, yeah. And I think thinking about the future again, and maybe one for you to pick up first, Rob, while we're checking if there's any questions from the audience. There's obviously a lot of new technologies, and has been in the last 24 months, and there will be more, you know, coming in the months and years to come. And they have helped us a lot with evolving our idea and understanding of how we can apply technology in communications, as well as an awful lot of other areas of business and life in general. What trends do you, as a kind of with your CEO hat on, what trends do you foresee in this area over the next 12 months? And I guess, do you foresee, if you can think of a curveball, is there anything that will be like, oh, wow, I didn't expect this, but it is still likely to happen?
Right. Well, I mean, I have to say, and honestly, we've been doing this for a long time, but I think the next year to 2 years is going to be really exciting. And even a lot of listing platforms and media platforms are going to look very different than I think what they look today, because they're going to be, it is going to be an ecosystem. So I think what we envision will be marketplaces of models. Clients will be building more and more of their own models. They have data science teams. We have a SaaS platform that lets them do that and deploy models directly into these platforms. But also see the unification of social with other voice of customer data. We're going to see there's a lot of first party conversation data within organizations that are kind of untapped. And so we're going to see a lot more of that. And these models start to generalize across those different broader data sets, which is already happening: media, social, reviews, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third piece is going to be what Kyle was talking about, is the predictability. Like, right, the world's moving too fast to kind of, look at, real time is, what's this saying sometimes, real time isn't always fast enough these days. And what I think we're showing, and we can demonstrate this, that this data has high predictive value within organizations towards predicting sales. And we can show, we have studies that go back in time. You can show 85% confidence in the model being able to predict certain outcomes in certain areas, CPG, other things as well. So getting predictive with this, I think, is going to be the third leg of tying together this perceptual data with buyer behavior data and first party data, so that we can actually bring these things together. So we can say exactly which of these perceptions are the ones driving a business outcome and which are the ones that are just noise, right? So we can start to triage that and get to the stuff that really matters, because, brands don't need to be drowning in even more metrics, especially kind of vanity metrics. And I know AMEC is an organization, we talk about that a lot. How do we measure outcomes? We can measure outcomes when we get to this level of data quality and data normalization. And that's massive.
And it would be remiss of us, as you say, to forget about what AMEC as an organization stands for in terms of looking at communications as a multifaceted discipline that requires going beyond the kind of simple vanity metrics and looking at outtakes and outcome and business impact. And ultimately, the role of all of us here on the call, listening and on the panel, is to think about our job as how we deliver value to the organizations we represent.
Right.
From an agency perspective, I guess, Aldo, I'm sure you have a lot of conversations internally at Edelman around what the future holds. Is there anything that you are preparing for? What does the future look like for you when it comes to dealing with data challenges and demonstrating value to clients?
I think, thinking about our region, I think clients would be demanding a service that could be more predictive in a way, a service that in a way we could bring your own data, for example, to upload, for example, I don't know, a press release, something that you want to communicate, and in the other hand, we could bring you like the trust score, or the way that you could communicate that in a way that you could enhance trust. So all our years working on the trust parameter has make us the chance to have this data lake where we are working on a trust stream, so we can predict in any market for any article or any piece of content, which the trust score could be about that. So I think this is a thing that we are already doing in EMEA or the US. I think that kind of demand could reach our region here in Latin America, and also could expand in developed markets. So I think that could be the future, and also that accuracy would be very important to predict and to do a prediction that could be believable in the future.
And this is very much a challenge that we all face, Aldo, across continents, really, in this profession. I think as we wrap up, maybe just one final note from everyone, starting with Kyle and Frank. If you could give one piece of advice to communications professionals and practitioners that are dealing with data quality challenges and data challenges in general, what would that be?
I'm going to do it very simply. Keep going, persist. The solutions are there if you take time to investigate them. So don't accept the status quo if it's not giving you what you want. Go out there and look for it. I know it's a lot of work.
Never despair.
Yeah, and to build on that, I would say that there's been so many different tools that have been popping up over the last couple of years with the explosion of the use of Gen AI with summaries and things like that. And there's a lot of different tools out there with video listening and ratings and reviews and traditional social listening, but then many other tools that are out there. And I think what we're going to see more and more is now that everyone is starting to use these tools, we're starting to be able to pressure test like, okay, which ones are actually giving us what we need, what's accurate, what is actionable, et cetera. And so to Kyle's point, keep pushing the tools and seeing what is going to be the best for you, and then what you need to customize internally, because maybe none of the tools have the perfect solution yet.
Thanks, Frank. And I think this is a fitting end to what seems to be a big discussion. And I hope that we have started to unpack and demystify that topic a little bit. And I certainly hope that we will continue this discussion offline and online as part of the platform that AMEC creates for this community. So to just wrap up, thank you everyone for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Please do go to the AMEC Measurement Month calendar of events on the amecorg.com website to check out any other events that you might be interested in. They run between now and the end of the month. All sessions will be available as recordings as well. So if you happen to have missed this one, please join us in an asynchronous way. We would love to hear your views shared with us on LinkedIn and our other social media channels. Thank you to our panelists, Rob, Frank, Kyle, and Aldo, and thanks Simon and Sophia for the initiative. This has been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.